But good afternoon, I'm Rajul Shah, and I run growth products at Zoom. So most of you likely know of Zoom as the video meetings company, but we're way more than that. About a third of our revenue comes from products as diverse as contact center, phone, revenue accelerator, webinars, events, whiteboards, video management, clips, scheduler. I can keep going on. And I promise you, Sam, this is not a product pitch of Zoom, although if you are interested in any of those, you can feel free to reach out to me. But really the reason why I bring that up to you guys is because in my role as running growth products, I have to constantly think about how to drive awareness and market those products at trade shows and events like yours. So, I guess what I would say is kind of the next 20 to 30 minutes is really kind of a vantage point from an outsider, right? Looking at what we need to do at events, how we need to be better at events, how we need to show up, both as attendees as well as sponsors. And again, hopefully that helps you guys think about, how you can organize and design those events. And as you can see from the title, the spoiler alert, it's not just about the swag. But quick framing before we get into it. So Zoom is at a lot of trade shows. We do big ones, we do small ones. We do them in the US, we do them in Europe, Asia, Latin America, South America. We sponsor them, we exhibit at them, we send our people to walk the floors as attendees for those that we don't sponsor. We've staffed the 8-foot table in the side hall with 2 people. We've also done the massive experiential booth in the middle of the largest convention centers in the world, staffed with hundreds of people. We've done keynotes, we've done breakout sessions, and after every event, we've done the post-show ROI math, more times than I can actually count. And then we spend countless hours figuring out which shows we want to go to the next year and how to show up to optimize our ROI. So again, everything I'm about to talk about is kind of from that vantage point of how we get value as an attendee and exhibitor. So for the first part, I want to frame up the attendee, right? So the attendee, who they are, what they want, how they decide and make decisions, whether that should I go to an event, what session should I go to, which booths do I want to visit, what are my goals and objectives of the event. All of that has substantially changed in the last decade. On the flip side, conversely, the overall event, the show floor, the session catalog, the nighttime events, by and large, that hasn't changed as dramatically as the attendee. The gap between what has changed from an attendee perspective continues to widen, and I believe that it's what most frustration is really about, even when it gets blamed on other things. So 40% of attendees say that their goals and objectives for going to an event aren't met, which has led to 15% attendance gap since pre-pandemic benchmarks. As an event organizer, what are you doing to close that gap? That 40% of objectives that aren't met, that 15% gap, that's the event organizer's problem to solve. It's answering the question to the attendee of, is it worth the trip? Answering the question to the exhibitor of, is it worth the spend and the time? The event organizer who sets the conditions for both of those is really what's going to power those people to come back. So what I would just say is if you're programming the same show that you programmed in 2019 or 2002, to Sam's point, right, you're programming for an attendee that no longer exists. So think about who used to walk into your event and onto the show floor 10 years ago. They came for discovery. The expo hall was where they discovered categories of products and services they'd never heard of. The sessions were where they learned about general topics and how others are doing things, right? Thought leadership. That attendee, that discovery mode attendee, is functionally gone. In this day and age, people can search, or to Shelly's point, you can ask an AI agent to really understand what those products and services are out there in the market and how others are doing things. By the time someone walks into your event or your exhibit hall, they've done their high-level diligence. They've seen the marketing video. They might have even read their G2 reviews. They've probably seen a webinar. I just want to say that. They've probably seen a webinar that shows what that product or service does, right? So they fundamentally know what the business does. And what they don't know, and what they're actually there to figure out, is whether your business as an exhibitor, sponsor, or your session as a speaker, how it fits their specific situation. They want real value, whether it be workshops, demos of their specific use cases. Can you offer something that helps them drive their business outcome? Something that captures value, something that drives revenue or cuts cost. And now even more crucially, how does your offer fit into their current infrastructure and how they run their business today? So if there's a stat that says 92% of attendees visit an event to explore new products and services, but the question on the floor has shifted. It used to be, what does this do? Now it's, how does this actually help me drive meaningful results? Or how does this work with what I already have? The exhibitors who are still leading with high-level conversations, still giving that elevator pitch, the marketing messages, and the sessions that are talking about super high-level stuff, they're answering a question that the attendee has already answered for themselves before they even got on the plane. Buyers spend 80% of their time in the buying cycle outside of talking to the company that's selling the product or solution. So they've already done the research. It's now about deeper dives into value and what you can convince them of to help them with their offering. So the other thing that Sam mentioned is 5 data points in 5 minutes, which I thought was amazing, was the relationship building and the networking part of it, right? And we are hearing from our own, as whenever we go to events or other attendees as well, the relationship building and the networking that is made at events is much greater than the spectacle. What I mean by that is attendees want practical learning. They want to build those relationships. They want to have the conversations that they weren't going to have if they didn't go to that event. And that outranks celebrity keynotes, even though those are fun, obviously. But really, attendees want to participate, not just observe. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. I want to talk about the generational piece. We heard Joshua and Diamond talk about it, what they want from an event. But it's real here, right? It is not, the generational shift isn't theoretical, it's real, and it's already showing up in who's walking your floors and coming to your events. 60% of trade show attendees are under 40 years old. Millennials and Gen Z make up over 75% of B2B buyers. The floor has shifted. The question is whether event strategy, booth strategy has shifted with it to provide that value to those attendees. So let's talk about the new attendee. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. 90 seconds, not a long amount of time. 90 seconds is roughly the window we see, and that the research we've done backs up, for a younger attendee, that new generation, to decide whether your booth or your session is worth their time. I'm pretty glad that after 90 seconds of me talking, everybody didn't file out, so thank you for staying with me on that. But in those 90 seconds, they're not browsing. They're not talking to a booth rep. They scan, they decide, they either stay or they move. And as a reminder, they likely have heard about what your product or solution does at a high level. If you don't earn that attention in that first 90 seconds, you've lost out on that opportunity. We talk about it as, kind of this dwell time, right? So anything under 90 seconds is just a pass through. 2 to 5 minutes, real interest. 5+ minutes, high purchase intent. So companies have 90 seconds before these new generation of attendees are gone. And oh, by the way, you got to compete against 50 other booths, 20 other sessions that are all happening at the same time. Now here's the part that gets missed. That same younger attendee is the highest leverage person in the room. Remember, we only used to care about like C-levels. Oh, we want to design for C-levels, VPs, SVPs to be at our booth and talk to us and have all those conversations. Guess what? The new generation of attendees are the ones who are going to go back and brief their VP, going to go back and brief their CEO. They're the ones who are likely to post on socials, either immediately or after the event. They are the ones who are also going to bring 2 colleagues back to that booth the next day. So when a booth or an event is designed entirely for the 50-year-old decision maker, what's actually happening is it's invisible to the 28-year-old who actually is going to shape that decision maker's opinion. Right? Look, we've all been told the real decision maker needs to be in the room, and that's not wrong, but at the end of the day, the first impression is not on the VP or that C-level, it's actually on that younger generation who has done the homework and who understands the value. And that's what we're seeing on the floor and in events every single day. And by the way, that's not even just in events, that's just in our normal conversations that we have with our customers, our partners, and our prospects as well. Okay, so we've talked about the attendee. Now I want to talk about the 3 days on the floor and how they're used, or more specifically, how underused they are. So this is probably the part of the talk that might be a little bit more actionable for the people in this room, because a lot of it is kind of within the control as organizers, not just your exhibitors. But there's research that tracks attendees using RFID. What they found is that the highest value attendees, the ones most likely to buy, spend 34% less time in scheduled sessions in the exhibit floor than everyone else. 52% of attendees said they preferred unstructured interactions with experts over formal ones. There's a 3.4x higher dwell time not in these sessions in the exhibit hall. So where are they? Where are they having those conversations? So most people walk into a trade show or an event thinking, you know, the sessions is when it starts, the expo hall, the expo hours are the main event. They're not. For us at Zoom, the night before the event officially begins, the morning before the keynote, the coffee line at 8 a.m., the breaks between sessions, those are the moments where we thrive, where attendees are most themselves. They haven't put on their game face yet, and in many cases, our competitors haven't put on their game faces yet. So for us, how do we win those moments? How do we win that time? We've had more honest conversations in those non-official moments than in any scheduled booth meeting. At a booth, the person who wanders over to the floor before the floor officially opens to our booth is usually the one who actually wants to talk. The second thing, you know, when we show up to a show, or when we showed up to a show before, we used to be like, hey, you know, blast on LinkedIn, come see us at booth 423, or here's a table, here we're gonna do a happy hour for Zoom, come see us, right? We don't honestly do that anymore at all. I mean, sometimes we maybe do, but most of the times we don't, right? Because really nobody cares about that. What we do is actually we send messages to specific people. It's the same thing that we would do with our, you know, high-level traditional marketing as well as our selling tactics, which is focus on an ICP and solve a true business problem, right? Something like, we know you're dealing with X, we have someone here who's worked through that exact problem, we have somebody here to help you, here's when to come by. The shows where we do that feel completely different. The conversations start warmer, the follow-ups are easier, and we're not spending day one explaining who we are. So for event organizers, what can you do to help exhibitors win before the floor opens? Right, in this mind, this is where kind of organizers can differentiate. Share attendee data early, not just a registration count, actual profiles. Who's coming? What do they care about? What sessions they've signed up for? The organizers who give us that data 2 weeks before the show are the ones that we're fighting super hard to go back to the following year. Because we can do then the targeting work. We can send the right messages to the right people. We can't do that if we don't know who's in the room until we get there. I think the same would go for attendees as well. Attendees want to know what's relevant to them. They want to understand what's specific to them and the specific problems that they're trying to solve for at their company. Okay, I want to put a name on what we just talked about because I think it's the thing most event organizers and exhibitors are leaving on the table. We call it the margins, the moments that aren't on the agenda. People design for those moments, but they don't do a great enough job of designing for those moments, which is why they're still available. So here's what I'd encourage every event organizer in this room to think about. Your attendees don't turn off when the session ends. I think Joshua made that comment, or maybe Diamond made that comment as well. Your exhibitors don't stop selling when the expo hours close. The day is longer than the schedule. If you design your show specifically starting with the margins and then branch out into the sessions and the expo hours and all the other events, I promise you it'll give you a better understanding of how to drive real meaningful conversations. It will create more surface area for the conversations that actually move things forward. You'll drive meaningful value for sponsors and attendees. Allow there to be that time, the time in the margins. You don't have to program every single minute, right? And again, I know in events, everybody's like, oh, let's get all these speakers. Let's make sure that we have the expo halls. And all of that stuff is important, don't get me wrong. But I think it's super critical to start in those margins because that's when those conversations happen. So here's what it looks like when someone gets it right. At a conference earlier this year, the organizer put a lounge, coffee, couches, right in the hallway between session rooms. Is that rocket science? No, I'm sure every single one of you have that and do that in your events, right? But instead of packing the agenda in, they left time that was not programmed, not sponsored, not forced. You literally couldn't walk to your next session without passing through it. And what happened? Organically, people stopped. They sat down. They started talking. Not because someone told them to network, because the space made it easy. That's designing with the margins first is the most important piece of it. You don't need to program every moment, and you can create conditions where the best conversations can happen on their own. I'll give you another example. It's not an event, but Steve Jobs, when he ran Pixar, he was very, very influential in everything that happened at Pixar. And so one of the things was he did the design on the headquarters. So he created a central atrium in the middle of the floor. And he said, nobody can have meetings from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So guess what happened? In those 2 hours, people had to go through the central atrium. They would chill out. They would hang out over there. Animators, writers, engineers would physically collide with each other throughout the day, especially in that 11 to 1 time frame. Same principle. You can't engineer serendipity, but you certainly can create conditions for it. If you don't allow for that, companies will go to your events, but not actually go to your events. What I mean by that is they'll park themselves at a restaurant next door. They'll go across to the coffee shop across the street. And they'll use those margins to get value without paying you a single dollar. So now let's talk about during the show on the show floor. So as an exhibitor, and I've exhibited a lot of events, my North Star is how do I get the right information into the hands of the right person at the right time. I think I do that in general, but even at a show, it's more important, right? Right information in the hands of the right person at the right time. So picture the traditional moment. A prospect walks into a booth with a niche problem. The booth representative doesn't have the right answer. They say, yeah, please wait here. My colleague's just finishing up with somebody else. And then they walk over. They're like, hey, are you almost done? Are you almost done? Let's go. Hurry up. That's one aspect of it. Or come back. We'll schedule some time, later on. Or let me have someone follow up with you. Well, guess what happens? The prospect takes a brochure, gets their badge scanned, walks away, and guess what? You never hear from them again, even if you reach back out to them. So that's the default option. Now picture the other version. Same prospect, same niche problem. The booth rep says, you know what? I can't answer that. But we have a customer that is dealing with the exact same problem, and we have someone available right now that can help you solve that problem. 5 seconds later, that person is on a screen, hopefully powered by Zoom, live, having a real conversation with the prospect. Different city, real answer, on the spot. The right person in the room virtually with the prospect. And obviously, yes, the technology does exist to do that. But again, I'm not pitching Zoom here, but I do think the design decision is the most important piece of it. How do event organizers help exhibitors do that? What tools do they give them? What technology do they give them? Do they have the option to bring in technology to maximize that 90-second window where an attendee comes to talk to you? That's what drives real conversations with real value that turns into sales, and exhibitors will come back more the next time. Okay, I want to stay on this for a little bit longer. So every booth has a screen. Most of them are running a brand video looped and on mute, which is quite honestly the lowest value thing that a screen can do. No offense if anybody out there has a booth and they're doing that. But seriously, if someone has been to your website, they've seen it before. If someone's walking by, they might miss that part that's most interesting to them. Even with closed captioning, nobody's actually reading while they're walking by. So as I mentioned before, right, the best exhibitors are bringing the right expert into the room live. Not a popped up laptop on a folding table, a clean broadcast quality feed on a large display so the remote person actually has presence. The technology to isolate a single high quality video feed and put it on a screen already exists. The exhibitors using it look like they've got a massive production crew. Most don't need one. And here's the thing that makes it land. When a remote participant says something that drives value, the room comes alive. We've had deals closed during that 5-minute window as the attendee is getting all of the information they need to make that decision. And that real conversation is the thing that no brochure, no giveaway can replicate. You can't manufacture it as an event organizer, but you can create the conditions for it. That line between a live event, in-person event, and the broadcast from experts coming in is disappearing. Right? The booths that can figure that out first are going to look very different from everything around them. And I believe it's super important for event organizers to embrace that and to allow for that technology, because that's what drives value for both the exhibitor and the attendee and gets them to come back again next year. How am I doing on time? Okay. So here's three patterns that we see from exhibitors who consistently get the most out of these shows. Not the biggest ones, but the ones who win the internal renewal conversation to go back to one of your shows or events every year. One, SMEs over swag. 30% of attendees wear the swag or use the swag that they received at a trade show. Not a big percentage, right? And by the way, those 30% might wear it once. 92% of attendees say that trade shows help them understand products and services better. So moving the booth budget from branded merchandise to actually getting the right people on the floor, subject matter experts over giveaways, that's a real big thing for us whenever we go to a show. Although I will say, we did give out Labubu's last year, and that was a huge, huge hit, but we won't go into that. 2, remote expertise live. So when the right expert can't physically be there, they bring them in remotely. Live, not recorded. The conversation still happens. It's on the prospect's timetable, not the exhibitors. And 3, they track repeat visitors, not badge scans. So we'll talk about this more on the next slide in terms of the ROI model. But the new ROI model isn't just about quantitative badge scans. I mean, we used to think about, oh, let's go to this show and get 200 badge scans, like that's a win for us. Or, oh, let's go get 400 badge scans or 50 badge scans or whatever that is. We actually don't look at that. It's really about engaged conversations and qualified leads with context. So someone who comes back the next day with a colleague is worth 10 first-time scans. That's the metric that actually tells them whether the booth conversation landed. So last year we actually said, you know what? We're gonna stop counting scans. We don't actually care how many scans we get. We started tracking repeat visitors, so people who came back from that company to the booth, as well as people that we talked to within a 48-hour window after the event. That was our first metric, obviously revenue and all those other things, but that was the first metric that we used. And the result of that was that we stopped spending time on the visitors who scanned their badge, who we never had a chance to close. And we focused on the visitors that we actually had a good chance to close. So in doing so, we actually optimized our time, and that's resulted in increasing our actual revenue from shows this year. So how can event organizers help facilitate this? Allow for the use of technology, help drive that use of technology. I promise you, you won't lose out on more people from the company coming to your event. They weren't gonna come anyways. Help with curated connections. Show exhibitors and attendees that you know about them, you understand them, that you want them to be successful and have meaningful conversations. Those little things help make the exhibitor feel like you're invested in their success, not just their check. Okay, so the exhibitor math, the ROI question. So here's the shift that's happening on ROI. Exhibitors like us used to ask the ROI question after the show. They'd go, they'd staff the booth, they'd come back, say, oh, how many scans did we get? What's our pipeline? And then 6 months later, we hope to have revenue, and then they'd decide whether to renew. That sequence has changed and broken now. Now we're asking the ROI question before we sign. Budgets are tighter. Attribution is harder. More places to spend a marketing dollar than there used to be. So exhibitors aren't just evaluating the event or the show floor, they're evaluating whether you, the organizer, have set them up to succeed before they ever arrived. Here's a scary stat. Only 6% of exhibitors are confident in their ability to convert trade show leads. Yet trade shows consume about 35% of annual marketing budgets. 64% rate ROI as their biggest challenge. And this is not for every single thing, this is more for the technology space in terms of those numbers, but it gives you a context of it. So how event organizers make exhibitors feel before the event, whether they feel like they've been set up to succeed before the event, is the most important. I think Bob mentioned it earlier in his speech, right? He goes and talks to them while they're at the event. That's super critical as well. We want to understand, do you understand our goals and objectives? What is our metrics that we're trying to get to? Do you understand that? Are you helping us do that, right? That's super important, right? Those are the conversations that need to happen. So the exhibitor briefings you run, the attendee data you share before opening day, the intro connections you make in advance, the margins you allow for in your event. Organizers who help exhibitors answer that ROI question up front with real data, not just promises, win the renewal before the show even happens. I'll say this directly. So at Zoom, we look at two things. The quality of the conversations that we had on the floor, and what did the organizer do to set us up for success before we arrived. That's it. Not, well, should we go to this event because it's a show in our space, all of our competitors are there, we should probably be there, we kind of have to be there. Not that anymore. Not, was the show good? Like, did it have all the other good stuff, good food, all that stuff? No, that's not it either, right? It's the shows that make us feel like we must be there because we'll miss out on revenue if we don't. We need to feel like the event organizer actually cares about us. cares about our optimization and our ROI before the event so that they understand what I'm doing or what we're trying to accomplish, not just when it's time for renewal. So if you're an event organizer, obviously, don't wait until after the show or the renewal season to ask how it went. Ask before the show what success looks like for your exhibitors, and then design your event to help all of your exhibitors get there. That's the sign of a true partnership. Okay, I'm gonna land the plane here. I got 4 minutes left. Or I'm gonna try to land the plane. So look, you can't control travel budgets. You can't control whether your keynote speaker is gonna cancel 2 weeks out. You can't control the economy. None of that's really your job. What is your job, and what I think matters more than any of those, is whether the person who walks into your show has a conversation they couldn't have had anywhere else. That's the product that you're offering, not the square footage, not the production value of the general session. The exhibitors and attendees who keep coming back, don't take offense to this, aren't loyal to your show. They're loyal to what happens when they're at your show. That's worth designing for. And I'll leave you with 2 stories because I think I have a couple minutes. So last year at a big show, we had a prospect walk up to our booth with a very specific problem. I won't bore you with what that problem was, but they had major issues with one of our competitors. The booth rep, quite honestly, couldn't talk about that detail, could talk only high level. So instead of just setting up time for later, she pulled one of our engineers who was on standby back in San Jose at our headquarters onto the screen. They had a 5-minute conversation, live, real time in the booth, but virtually. After those 5 minutes, the prospect's exact words were, "I've been trying to get this answer for 6 months." That conversation couldn't have happened over email. I probably shouldn't say this, I know it's being recorded. It probably couldn't have happened over Zoom because it just wouldn't have happened. That conversation happened in the room because 2 people needed that information and they got that information in real time. Just to be clear, I say all that because if you think about it, the screen was there, the expert was available, and the booth was built to make that moment possible. That's what's worth designing for, the conversation someone couldn't have had anywhere else. I'll leave you with one last story. So I had a show 2 years ago, an organizer did something small. They designed for those margins, they put 30-minute gaps between sessions and set up that lounge that you pass through to go from one session to another, like I talked about before. No programming, no agenda. One of our team sat down next to someone from a company we've been trying to reach for a year. 20 minutes later, we had a meeting on the books. That meeting and like 30 subsequent meetings, maybe more than that, turned into one of our largest deals. The event organizer didn't know that they had caused that, but they did because they designed for the margins. Those experiences, those moments, that's what keeps exhibitors and attendees coming back. I'm gonna probably say something that's is true, but maybe hard to hear. At that conference, I can't tell you who more than 3 of the speakers were. I really can't. I don't remember what the other 50 sessions were about. I don't really remember how the food was. I mean, this was 6 months ago, and I don't remember any of that. But I do remember the look on Danielle's face when she came over and said, "Guess what? I got a meeting scheduled with this awesome company that we've been trying to get into for a year." And so what I mean by that is, it's this human-to-human connection that you have at your events. How do you optimize for that? How do you design for that? How do you drive that? Which is the most critical piece, in my mind, as an exhibitor, sponsor, and attendee, in what makes an event successful. So anyways, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful.
Let me in the game, Coach.
All right.
Let me in the game, Coach. One question for you. This was very invigorating, very informative. In advance, when Zoom has an exhibit, using your technology and using the fact that you want to bring in subject matter experts virtually, do you in advance in your promotion let your key customers know that from 2 to 2:30, this engineer from India will be available to answer your questions?
We certainly do, right? So that goes back to the point about how we want to segment the day. But there has to be those days broken up, and that the event organizer has to design for those moments. So we certainly have we call them like office hours with a contact center engineer, or a webinar engineer, or a revenue accelerator engineer. And so we bring those people in there. Look, I know what some event organizers are like, well, we could have had more dollars if we had those people come in. Look, I don't think companies are going to do that all the time anyways, but just having that person there really drives value and gives us the opportunity to go back to those events in the future, right? And to your point, like, we really truly do look at events, a ton of different events every year, and we say which ones are the ones that we really want to participate in and spend a lot of money at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
good
you very
job.
much.
Really good job. Thank you.